So today I'm basically going to talk about, in terms of geography, just the UK experience, to be clear. And I'm going to talk about how the architect profession has changed, specifically in the post-war period, post-Second World War period. What else should I add in terms of introduction? I suppose, well, some people ask why I'm interested in this. So actually, Michael Siebert is an architect. I'm clearly not. My father was an architect. He's now retired. So the era in which I'm talking about, the impacts were directly felt by me and my family, as an example. So I've always had a kind of interest in this from that. So I'll be going over particularly the sort of changes that occurred in the 70s, the 1980s, and the 1990s. And it's very much about professions and professional power and professional control, how it's been challenged in many ways, and maybe resurgent in terms of architects. That's an open debate that we come to. Okay. So the paper examines, as I say, the reasons why UK architects as a professional body, okay, has lost knowledge, power and control in specifically the domestic housing market. So I want to emphasize this. So it's the buildings that you and I live in, not work in. That's a very different sector, okay, or subsector with different dynamics going on. Okay, so the market I'm defining here as a particular area of activity, okay. And what we'll do is we identified a number of so-called internal or endogenous factors that have sort of played out here, as in amongst the architectural profession, okay? They've assisted this story, so to speak, or narrative. And also a lot of sort of exogenous factors, which we've also talked about in many different ways in other fields, okay? So things like globalization, neoliberal state development in the UK, etc. But these clearly had an impact as well into how the changing fortunes of that particular profession. Okay, and the forward look part is saying, well, okay, this is the current state of play. We'll do a bit of an assessment, saying, well, okay, will this continue the current position, or maybe architects could regain their particular position? And this is a position basically as the chief coordinator, okay, of a process, a design process, but also a construction process, and I'll discuss that within that. So would they become, as they used to be, the systems integrator, to call it that, okay? All right. There's two theoretical literatures I'm going to draw upon. If I start coughing, I do apologize. Been a bit ill the last few days. One is systems theory, where you can understand this system integrator from, and the other is this sociology of professions literature, which we mentioned at various points. Okay. So in terms of systems theory or evolutionary systems, complexity theory, you should start with this idea of, well, what's complexity in design? That's one aspect, okay? And that itself has a number of different dimensions. Okay, so as Gottfried Semper discussed a long time ago, architectural space is a surrogate skin. Okay, we live and work and breathe in all of these buildings. Okay, they keep us warm. We can do activities effectively or not effectively within them, within those spaces. So it's very important in domestic environment, but also obviously the work environment. So within this design complexity, there's 4 dimensions. You could think of them as factors, but think of as dimensions, okay? So one is clearly the financial. What's the cost of building this thing? Can it be done profitably? Just as important, once it's agreed on a price, is it delivered on time and at cost? We'll see that's actually a fundamental issue within all of this. The other is the social. So within domestic housing, as you'll see later, there is very much the issue of the designer thinking about how they can impact society, okay, in a positive way. All right, because of the importance of these buildings. And this was very much a tradition, post-war tradition in the UK, that they were seen to be social re-engineering, okay? And they lost that position. Maybe again, the UK, given the way it is with housing, for domestic housing, maybe we need something again new, okay? The third one is environmental, and that's more of a pressing issue these days than it probably has used to be. So we're talking about, what's the environmental impact of buildings, okay? Are they sustainable in terms of the way they're constructed in the UK, all right? As well as their, obviously, environmental impact in heat, energy, sustainability, and so on. The other one, which we were talking about just before the break with Mel, these architects think of themselves as very much as designers. Okay, that's only one dimension, but they see themselves as designers of space. They're supposed to be part of their expertise base. So these are 4 core dimensions. They're non-linear in their interactions. Okay, so if something happens in one, you may need to change completely the other dimension, okay, on a building or on a project. So in terms of aesthetics, because that's what they love, here's a lovely little one I took in Paris last week, okay, the Louvre, the architect being Ming Pai, okay, who's passed away, unfortunately, in May. So we understand aesthetics in this sense, okay, so the pyramid building itself. So that's where the architect is changing the space, the understanding of a space. I think we can get that notion of aesthetics and design. Okay. The other aspects, I've already mentioned that, how they interact. The other aspect is complexity in construction itself, or projects, construction projects, okay? So there are a large number of actors, actons, if you're into that sort of literature, STS literature, okay? There are people, products, processes that have to come together in a particular way and be organized and synthesized to deliver a project, okay? If any one of those things doesn't particularly work, and this is very typical, the thing gets extended, you have to start redesigning, reprojecting it, etc., at cost. Again, the interactions between these are very nonlinear as well. Okay, small differences in initial conditions can result in very different outcomes. And architecture is replete with these. So what maybe you see as the design winning award and what you see in reality can be very different for any number of reasons, because something's happened in the process of construction. Okay, they could be very far away from each other. Okay, the ex ante and the ex post. So these is due to feedbacks. Again, this is very non-linear. So any kind of hold up can have a real major impact on the point of design, what's actually given and at what cost, etc., etc. So we have these two clusters of complexity going on. So it's very much a sort of systems theory. So the key question then comes, who's integrating this? Okay, who has the skills and capabilities and wherewithal to do this system integration? Okay. Because you have someone who has to integrate all of the processes, all of the people. In typical, even when you talk about domestic house building, you have lots and lots of different contractors. And over time, it's even more specialized. All right? So you need someone to do actually a system integration in all of this. So that leads us to this second connection then with the sociology professions literature. So I think I mentioned some of these things as well through the discussions. So professions is an alternative way alternative to the market and to bureaucracy, to state bureaucracy, okay, for the organization of work activities, okay, and the final delivery of those goods and services. So I think that's an important distinction to make, okay. And this is from the work of Evitz and others, okay. There's a big emphasis in this literature on autonomy and self-regulation. We had this discussion about, was it German Beruf, I think, was it? Okay. So that's really important. So the state, in some sense, is giving over responsibility to these professions, okay, to organize the work activities, and not just the work activities, self-regulate themselves as well, okay. And this goes into knowledge, skills, training, education. When things go wrong, who has the legal responsibility for sorting it out, okay? If you're a wrongdoer, that group of profession itself will kick you out of the profession, in principle, okay? I was interested when we looked at the university and the prisons. That's another nice example, right? I mean, that is exactly self-regulation. There's a really other important thing which is highlighted in this literature, and I think that's really important, is you talk about true profession, that the professions see themselves as being the best place to act in the interests of their client, okay? And that's not just a boastful thing, they actually do believe that. So we know that from medicine, from law. They can be quite technical knowledge fields, so how can anyone else negotiate it? It's tough enough anyway. And also there's an ethics dimension to that, which I think is really important if we talk about what are professions and what are not professions. So the classic one in medicine, do no harm. And that overrides as an ethical principle anything else, including profit making. Okay, I think that's really something important that distinguishes professions from other areas. And it's founded upon these knowledge and skills, etc., which I think links with the theme of the workshop. Okay. The other aspects of it is professional governance is very much amongst the community itself, okay? And they have collegial working relationships. I think that's something that's very important I haven't heard much of in the debate, but I think that's highlighted in the literature. And professional values. How do you understand your world? How do you go about acting? It's very much a shared identity based upon this specialist knowledge, okay, and identity construction. And so professions tend to be more mutually supportive of each other. Okay, the actual actors within this. Okay. So, coming to Evit's work, I say she's a major professor at Nottingham University in the sociology department. She contrasts this occupational professionalism with managerial professionalism. Okay, which we've seen increasingly prevalent in the neoliberal states in the UK from the 1970s onwards. This serves not the interests of the profession and the client, but the interest of the organization, okay, whatever that happens to be, profit-making, whatever it would be. Okay, so it's a very different set of objectives. And how do you achieve these? You achieve it in different ways, not collegial working things through. It's about setting up targets. Okay, and you are using IT systems to set up identifiable targets, and everyone in that organization should be meeting these targets. I think we're all familiar with that now and increasingly in academia. Okay, this is how the thing works. Okay, and that's how the system is regulated in many ways. So, what's happened in the UK from the 1970s onwards was where previously it was the architect who was a chief system integrator. In domestic household construction, it's been that moved to the large contractor, okay, who actually grew as a sort of identifiable agent, if you like, in that period. And they used a combination of two things, which I have up there. So one is design and build, okay, which is basically a system of contracts, okay, contractual relationships with all the suppliers within that. And then there's a lot of oversight goes on that to monitoring contracts. All right, so there's expertise in that thing. And also IT, which was coming along at the time, was used to facilitate this design and build program. Because obviously it cut down the cost of coordination and monitoring, etc. So it's used basically, and when we think about, as I said, the different elements of design, the primary focus of the large contractor is financial. Okay, that's their expertise, is in the cost control. All right? That's the main thing that they're focusing on. Okay. I'll talk about a bit more about that in a moment, about the differences between them. The interesting thing, I think, in terms of Nordergraph's work, but that's been health again, but is a Nordergraph does suggest that, okay, it's not necessarily just the two alternative paradigms or regimes that people are going, as if they're sort of structurally given and people can move across them. There's been a lot of literature on that. He's actually arguing that you can take some of these professional groups and they will start embodying some of these other aspects of managerialism for themselves. So they may well evolve and change as a professional group over time. So basically, because of the story is one of, okay, one of the key problems of architects historically in the UK for domestic house construction was basically they couldn't control costs. Okay, that was the fundamental flaw. They would do all the other stuff over and above costs, okay? But maybe if they are taking on board that cost control as being more important to themselves as their activities and using new IT developments which were on the horizon, they could potentially become the system integrator once again. So this would be sort of housing background. So, because we talked about this thing yesterday about guilds. So it's actually rather late. It's 1834 is when there's a charter given to architects in the UK. So it was relatively late. And there wasn't a guild, so to speak, of architects before that. So, and RIBA is a Royal Institute of British Architects. Okay, that's the one of the main bodies representing them. So it was a royal charter given to them. They have a training, picking up on some discussions yesterday. They have a training in which is 3 parts, RIBA 1, 2, and 3, it's known as. It's a minimum of 7 years training, 2 of which are in practice. Okay, so you can't qualify unless you've done practice. That's important as well. There's a whole history of domestic house building going back actually to the 1868. So Liverpool, where I'm originally from, had the first council housing in Europe. Okay, but it wasn't a major issue. It was actually pushed and developed by the 1919 House and Town Planning Act, which allowed corporations, which are councils, okay, to provide social housing. All right. Post-war era, there's a whole lot of things going on, which is why architects became this dominant system integrator in this particular submarket. So you had, obviously, the Blitz destroyed, not just London, by the way, although that's what everyone seems to portray these days. Every major city in Britain was hit by bombing in the Second World War. Major destruction, all had to be dealt with, particularly in the Midlands, Birmingham, but also in all of those industrial towns in the northwest of England. Okay? Oh, and also Glasgow, of course, and Belfast. So that was the sort of background. You had also a lot of semi-skilled people being released by the army after the war, so there was quite a lot of available labour to do this activity. There was a general social agreement. This was very important to do. Okay? And they gave this task over to the architect profession. these were the guys who were going to design this utopia for us. These were the experts, okay? That's how it was basically agreed. And they had a particular view of modernism, which was later challenged, okay? And this came from the pre-war era, okay? So Le Corbusier, okay, Frank Lloyd Wright as well, form follows function. So they had like a sort of text of how they should go about doing this and the exemplars to use. So this is Le Corbusier in Marseille, okay, and we can recognize this as sort of a sort of template that everyone was using in the 1950s and 1960s in the UK. We also have Gropius, Bauhaus Bridge, which is this bit, so it's a really important bit, actually. It's quite low, that, but it was known as the walkway in the sky, and we had lots of those in England. So you had all the big high-rises, and you had these walkways in the sky. And it was an alternative idea of utopia, modernism. Okay, so that was the vision. What we've ended up with is this in England. This is what is built currently, okay? Which architects like Mike would call vernacular, and it's not meant in a positive way at all, by the way. I didn't understand that for a while. So this is as a classic, you recognize it, I suppose, right? This is what is built all over the place. This is built to cost, that's the main thing. Basically, there's a sort of limited pattern book almost that these large contractors use, very limited. You don't need any architects, really. Okay. So, endogenous factors, how did this come about, this story? I've sort of hinted at a few of them. So one is a lack of balance in design. And most architects, if they're honest, will hold their hands up still to this day. Okay? They really are into design. They're into the social bit, okay? They're into the ethical bit of social housing, yeah? They're not really that bothered about money. Either their own salaries, relatively speaking, or that of coming up to building on time, okay? But that's a major problem for the profession, okay? Because they have to have a balance between all of them. There was also, due to a number of factors, which I've written in the paper but I won't bore you with now, there was also a loss of faith, okay, in architects as a people to deliver this utopian dream, okay? It could be well that most Brits don't really want to live in high-rise accommodation in the end of the day, okay? It could be that. One of the other things which is well known is that when we had people moving out of terraced housing and tenement housing, which is very poor quality, built in the Victorian era, and they were rehoused to other areas, they were usually rehoused not with people who were living around them, or if they were eventually, they were not in the same social clusters and so on, okay? And this was very much resented at the time. So that had a big impact. There was also, in the early 1980s, there were people like Prince Charles saying we should all live in nice little utopian villages, as he would say, you know, cricket on the lawn and that kind of thing. We should all be living in that kind of thing. But there's also actually a debate inside the community of architects in the UK. They didn't know how to respond to this. So that was a major failing on their part. They didn't know how to control it and have an answer to this problem. There's another aspect, which is weakness due to the representation by multiple professional bodies, okay? So I've told you about RIBA already, who was given the charter. But there is another body, the Architects Registration Board, okay? Now, historically, this has been a problem in the UK, that there isn't one body representing and doing pure governance. So basically, what the political state could do when it moved to neoliberalism, they would play one off against the other. Okay, so this was a real major shortcoming in terms of how the profession organizes itself. You could say, for example, we'll think about medicine, there's lots of different professions there. Ah, yes, but there's only one for surgeons, there's one for nurses, they don't mix. Okay, they're specialized representatives. I think that was your discussion, I asked you that question yesterday. Because that's traditionally seen, this professions literature as being a real weakness if you got that, and they have it here. Okay. So what are the exogenous factors to the decline of the profession in this era? Well, as I mentioned already, there was the rise of neoliberalism. There was a reconstruction of this agreement between the state and the profession, okay? So it went from basically saying, well, okay, you regulate yourself, to actually, no, we're going to start having different ways in which we're going to try and regulate you. What it did in 1978, the government put forward to Monopolies and Mergers Commission to look at allegedly monopolistic tendencies in architecture, okay? And it did one of two things. It removed the so-called fee scale, which was fixed, okay? So it was a fixed fee scale. Didn't matter which architect it was, they'd pay the same fee. Okay, that was deemed to be uncompetitive, because that's what economists see, all right? And the other thing was they were not previously allowed to advertise. So that was changed, okay? So The argument, of course, in neoliberalism is this is a sort of pseudo-competitive market now, therefore consumers will have more choice. The big downside of getting rid of the fee, in fact, was they had used this money not just for having nice big profits, but actually when there was a problem in construction, they had the financial resources to pay to sort it out. Okay? Once you remove that money, there was nothing. Also, which came up in the guilds, I think, yesterday. I can't remember who said it. Very much there was the argument, well, okay, this is a sort of the upside of it, okay? It's going to be this quality control, okay? So the problem was, at a much reduced fee, actually delivering the quality of service that they used to do prior to that. Okay? It became a race to the bottom, literally. Salaries plummeted. The kind of work, as it shifted from council dwellings, okay, which were more bespoke, suited the local environment and so on, to this sort of standard pattern book. There are very few architects being employed now in this area. So that was the impacts of the deregulation that happened, okay? There was also this, as I mentioned before in the beginning, this diffusion of managerialism as an alternative with the large contractors, okay? So design and build is a process, okay? So it's a bunch of series of contracts. It's not about personal relationships anymore, built through trust and history and so on, okay? Not just amongst the architects, but obviously amongst their providers, which would be usually more local, okay? So now you can move to a more global model where you're having other people from Europe maybe delivering services through a set of contracts, okay, at lower cost. Okay? So this was the model that the large contractors built upon. And IT was used as a way of facilitating that, okay? It would have been possible, I think, without IT being around, but we don't really know. So technological change was very important for facilitating that. It was also this more knowledgeable, empowered contractors, important in the sense, as I say, of they really do have the core skill base is in controlling costs. That's how they see themselves. We are profit-making entities. We control costs to make profits. Everything else, fine. Okay. So, final set, to wrap it up, really, is what's the future? Because quite ironically, some of the changes that occurred are now causing problems for this current set of relationships. So first of all, there is the limitations of this speculative model. Okay. What has been built has been very small in terms of supply. It's been in greenfield sites which are further and further away from cities where people work for the vast majority. In terms of the quality of these houses, these rinky-dinky little houses, you know, they're very expensive, not particularly great quality. But that's what customers would argue. They're not particularly built to last, which is kind of interesting. I know a couple of people, you know, they have banisters in and they bought these, and then within a year or two, the banisters came off the wall and things, and, you know, so interesting. So there's general dissatisfaction amongst the public, who can, that small number of the general public who can afford to buy these things with the quality and the available choice. Because I say they're pretty much more or less the same everywhere. There's a chronic shortage of supply, okay? That links to my point before about the making money out of the greenfield sites. There's barely any money really to be made on brownfield sites. Private contractors don't want to touch it. Even though there's been allegedly incentives given by numerous governments, because we know where the problem is. You've got to have more high-density housing in inner cities. That's where the objective is. There's been, for example, in Manchester and other cities, there's been conversion of warehouses, lots of that, but no new building going on. Okay, because the cost, as I say, of cleaning up polluted land is very expensive potentially. Okay, there's no profit in it whatsoever for these people. Okay. And also, it's not just about that, but the scale now of the problem is such that there's none, even the big contractors, there's about 8 big contractors. None of them have the wherewithal, okay, the ability to meet now a sufficient level of building that could meet the demand that's there. So it needs fundamental change. And interestingly, in the last couple of weeks, regulations have been relaxed slightly in terms of the councils, okay? And it means now councils in London, in Manchester, in Liverpool are now finally starting to be allowed to start providing council housing again in too small quantities, all right? But that which has been organised by architects again, and everyone seems to be very happy with the quality of it. It's affordable rent again. It's what people basically want. So there's an opportunity in here. There's a whole other set of issues which is about things have moved on in the last 40 years, which is, as we're all aware, environmental sustainability, imprint, or footprint, sorry, of energy consumption in new houses. What does it need to be? And that takes fundamental, if you're going to be serious in meeting that challenge, it's going to take fundamental different kind of designs than the ones we're used to, okay, to meet those self-sufficiency of energy needs. okay? Ways of recycling heat and energy around the house and so on. Combinations of heat and power. All these kind of things would be radical changes in kind of the designs and city designs, in fact, than we have in our nice little cute little individual houses in the green belt, okay? So a new model is basically needed to bring these four-dimensional designs once again into alignment. Okay. So this is the open-ended question. Really? No one really knows this going forward. Is the architect the best person to once again become the system integrator? We don't know, simply as it stands. In terms of their knowledge bases, they have enough of each of those knowledge bases. That's where their competencies lie. They're still trained in all four of those. They could, in principle, be the person who could be the system integrator. Okay. Certainly it's not the contractor, because of what the large contractors are doing is simply, using architects as just another input, but they have themselves no expertise in environmental legislation, for example, or heat and energy, new technologies. They don't have that expertise. So how do they become or maintain to be the system integrator? It's an open question. There could also be, like in lots of other areas with new technologies and changes, it could be a completely other person that comes into this and becomes a dominant actor. That's another possibility. I've even seen IKEA, believe it or not, or some-company of IKEA say in Germany, yeah, wanting to move into this market. So, sort of prefab buildings, and in principle, you could do this stuff somehow tailored in China and bring it over. There's lots of different possibilities. It could be another actor completely. Okay? But I think as it stands, the architect is currently the one actor with a broad set of skills and oversight to actually do this integration activity. But we shall see. We shall see going forward. Okay. But, and this is the final bit of the slide, okay, go back to an order graph. Can the architects reform themselves enough as a group, as a professional group, okay, to take on the important roles of managerialism within their understanding of themselves and how they operate in those skill sets? That's what's required. So it's a training issue and a self-understanding issue and an interest issue. I suppose going forward we could do some surveys of architect students and see how much they value that. So that would be interesting to see maybe. The other key issue is going back to this issue of representation. There are still these two professional bodies clashing with each other all the time, which makes them weak in terms of negotiating with contractors, with government, with everybody else. So power is another of these things that I think we've talked about enough, to be honest, the last couple of days. It's very clear here. There needs to be an integrated group with sufficient power, okay, to push themselves forward. And it could be even reversals of these notions of fees and independent control. Could be another thing. Okay. So the takeaways, okay. So we've taken this sort of systems theory and this professions literature, try to sort of bring it together to give a sort of framework or lens to use to look at this particular group. We've applied it to try and understand a key set of internal and external factors, okay. How they've affected the way in which the history's evolved in the post-war period, and maybe how it would go forward as well. And I think we can make it maybe, if it pans out the way we think it might do, if the architect start reforming himself, it will be a nice example then, exemplar, potentially, of sort of organising professionalism, which could be interesting, I think, generally. Leave it there. Thank you very much.